Hari Om. Today we will proceed with Bhagavad Geeta, chapter 13, from verse number 13. This chapter, as you all may recall, started with a question from Arjuna to Krishna to clarify six important Vedantic terms. The terms are Kshetra, Kshetrajna, Jnanam, Neyam, Prakriti and Purusha. Out of these six topics, Krishna has already explained the first the first three topics, that is Kshetra, Kshetrajnam and Jnanam, up to verse number 12. So the next topic that Krishna is going to explain is called Neyam, from verse number 13. Now, we must understand that the verses of chapter 13 are very subtle, as they are a reflection of the teachings of the Upanishads. So one has to pay very close attention to these verses. Unlike previous chapters which highlighted on devotion and karma, this chapter 13 onwards highlights Jnanam, and that is Atma Jnanam, knowledge of the self. So the self is Brahman. Brahman is unmanifest, meaning not subject to our sense perception. Yet it is there, it remains in the universe, pervading every object. The seeker has to first understand the nature of Brahman through the path of Jnana Yoga, and then experience the state of Brahman at the time of meditation. Yet how to explain the very nature of Brahman, which itself has no attributes? This is the glory and the profound wisdom of the Upanishads and the teachings of the great masters like Adi Sankaracharya, Ramana Maharishi, Ramakrishna Paramahansa, and many others who have conveyed the existence of Brahman through allegorical language, as you will see from this verse up to verse number 17. So now the Lord is explaining about Neyam, which is the goal of every spiritual seeker. Neyam, what is the nature of Brahman? That is basically what is Neyam, which is the goal of every spiritual seeker to be known. So the Lord says, Brahman is sarvam, everywhere. Avritya, it is pervading. So this Brahman is everywhere, it is pervading. Tishtati, everything that exists in creation. That means nothing can exist outside of Brahman. Anything that exists out of Brahman will mean non-existence. So the word avritya means to envelop everything. Since Brahman is all pervading, it is outside and inside every object. Therefore, everything in creation is within Brahman. So how does the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita explain this Brahman? He says, Brahman is sarvataha, or has sarvata, has everywhere, pani. Pani means hands. So this Brahman has hands everywhere, and padam, it has feet also everywhere. Now if we take a direct reading of this verse, it will mean that Brahman has many hands and Brahman has many feet. But if we think logically, Brahman is attributeless. It has no form, no shape, no size. So how can Brahman have hands and feet everywhere? This is an allegorical explanation that means that wherever we see hands, wherever we see feet, there Brahman exists. Brahman is in everybody's hands, Brahman is in everybody's feet. So, in short, Brahman is all-pervading. In the Purusha Suktam from the Rig Veda, there is also a beautiful verse which says that it starts with the chanting Sahasra Shirsha Purusha. The Supreme Lord has Supreme Lord's universal form has 1,000 heads, 1,000 eyes, 1,000 feet, for he contains all living entities. Having pervaded the universe completely to give it existence and being independent, he, the Lord, extended himself beyond the universe. So this is a very important thing that we must read it allegorically. So this verse 13 goes on to say, with that same understanding, Tat Brahman, that Brahman who has hands and feet everywhere, has also Sarvatra, everywhere, Akshi meaning eyes, Shiro meaning heads, and Mukham meaning mouths. Again, not that Brahman has got these organs everywhere, but it means that wherever these organs are present, Brahman is there. So Brahman is in everybody's eyes, Brahman is in everybody's heads, Brahman is in everybody's mouths. So thus Brahman is Sarvataha, all pervading, everywhere. Furthermore, Brahman is also Sarvataha Shruti. Wherever there are ears, Shruti, Shruti Mat Loke. Mat means that Loke in this world. So wherever there is a presence of ears in this world, Brahman is also present. He is therefore also known as, he has another name which is known as all-knowing, because he is everywhere listening also. So this also conforms to the principle that God being everywhere, he is not only omnipresent, but he is also omniscient. He sees and hears everything. When we say that, it means he is the witness to all our actions. That Brahman exists everywhere by pervading everything in creation. Now, let's take an example when we take some gold. Gold is only of one type, but we take this gold and we make it into some ornaments. We change the shape and the size of the gold. We have a ring, we have a bracelet. So we wear them, but we don't worship them, right? We wear them, but we don't worship them. Now, supposing we take these ornaments, we melt these ornaments, from that gold, we make an idol of Ganesha. We worship then that idol. But the essence of that idol and your ornaments is one and the same. It is gold appearing in different forms. Yet one we worship and one we don't. But to a devotee of Lord, he or she sees the Lord in everything, be it an idol, be it an ornament, be it a tree, be it a cow or a human. The essence is the one consciousness. There is a beautiful story I read somewhere about a rich man who got into some financial difficulties, and as a result, he was forced to pawn his Ganesha idol, which was produced from pure gold. So the goldsmith weighed the Ganesha idol and offered to pay the rich man the current rate per kilogram of gold that the Ganesha statue weighed. So the businessman decided to also sell the little mouse that comes with Ganesha, which also was made of gold. Again, the goldsmith weighed the mouse and offered the businessman the same current rate per kilogram of gold. The businessman was shocked. He told the goldsmith, "How can you offer the same rate per kilogram for both Ganesha and the mouse? Ganesha is much greater, the Almighty Lord. The mouse is not as great as Ganesha." The goldsmith laughed and said, "Sir, to you Lord Ganesha and the mouse are different. But from the standpoint, I only look at both of them from the same standpoint of the content of gold. To me, one is not greater than the other." In the same way, a realized soul sees that one unchanging divinity in all. He does not consider whether one is young or old or thin or fat or short or tall. The essence in all the diversity of creations is the one and same consciousness. Tulsidas, endowed with supreme devotion, seeing the presence of Lord everywhere, writes, knowing the whole world to be the manifestation of Sita and Rama, I prostrate to all with hands bowed in worship. So now we move on to verse 14. So for this all-pervading Brahman, now the Lord explains that it is not inert. It exists, but it has other qualities. It is radiating with consciousness. The sense organs of a human or animal are gross, but because of the enlivening presence of Brahman, the sense organs are able to function, to see, to touch, to smell, to feel, to hear. The very fact we see the creation, which is made of matter and therefore inert, yet it has vibrancy, it has life, indicates to the discerning mind the very presence of the life-giving principle of Brahman. So the Lord says the all-pervading Brahman, it abhasham. Abhasham means it shines, it blesses everything with this consciousness. Through guna, the functions of the sarvendriya, all the 5 sense organs. Through the sense organs, we are able to experience the entire external world due to the consciousness of Brahman within. Eyes, ears, nose are all made of matter. Matter is inert, yet eyes can see, nose can smell, ears can hear due to the very blessings of the consciousness called Brahman. So by hearing, seeing, touching, tasting, we should realize the very existence of Brahman. So while Brahman is all enlivening, all the senses to experience, however, we must note, Brahman does not have any sense organs of his own. To dispel this ignorance, Sri Krishna says, Sarva, all indriya, sense organs, this Brahman is vivarajitam, it is devoid of. Brahman is unmanifest, so it does not have eyes, ears, nose, etc. In the in the Kena Upanishad also, there is one interesting discussion between the master and the student. And the student asks the master, by whom, willed and directed, does the mind light on its subjects? By whom, commanded, does the prana, the breath, move? By whose will do men speak this speech? What intelligence directs the eyes and the ear? And the master replies, it is the ear of the ear, the mind of the mind, the tongue of the tongue, and also the life of the life and the eye of the eye. So what it means is there is some consciousness that enlivens the eyes, that is called the eye of the eye. There is some consciousness that enlivens the ears, that is the ear of the ear. So when the master replies it is the ear of the ear, it is not that Bhagwan has got some super special ears that help all ears to hear, or super special eyes that help all the eyes to see. Bhagwan is devoid of all organs, sarva indriya vivarjitam. So what the master is indicating is that our gross physical eye is able to function because of another subtle power that is consciousness. The gross physical eye is matter, which is inert. The description of Bhagwan is he is consciousness that enlivens all the organs. Now if we take the example of the tube light, we can see that it is illumining this hall, but the tube light is able to do so because of the power of the unseen electricity. So in the same way, Bhagwan provides the power for all the organs to function, but Bhagwan himself is devoid of all organs. The next point to be noted about Brahman is that while Brahman is enlivening the senses or the sense organs to experience, Brahman does not get affected by the experience of the sense organs. Brahman is only the enlivening factor and never gets affected by the result of that experience. So the Lord says in this verse number 14, the pure existence is asaktam, unaffected. eva, verily, by the experience of the sense organs. So whatever is the color of the bulb, if we take another example, whether the bulb is red or blue or green, it does not affect the color of the electricity. In the same way, with the presence of Brahman, the sense organs are able to experience the world. However, Brahman is not affected by these interactions. So now comes another quality of Brahman. We can compare this to example of space. Just like space, it pervades everywhere, yet it does not get affected, but it supports everything. In the same way, the Lord says in verse 14, Brahman Sarva is the supporter. Now, in that verse, in chapter 9, verse 6, Bhagavan gave the example of how the mighty air, which is all pervading, rests or is supported by space. It is the substratum of all. Just like cinema screen on which all the actions are projected, the screen remains unaffected by what is projected. If there is rain, the screen does not get wet. If there is fire, the screen does not get burnt. Yet the screen is the supporter of all actions. Without the screen, there can be no projection of action. Without Brahman as the ultimate support, no transactions or experience can take place. Furthermore, the Lord says Brahman is nirgunam, free from all the three gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas. All beings act according to the influence of the gunas. Brahman is taintless. Whichever avatar he descends on earth and acts, his actions transcend the three gunas. So Brahman is guna bhoktra. He is the enjoyer of the gunas. Brahman, being sentient consciousness, experiences the gunas but is never affected by them. So Brahman witnesses every action that is done by the body, mind, intellect, but is never affected when the gunas interact with the world. And we can refer this also to another verse in the Gita, chapter 3, verse 28. Now we come to verse number 15 that explains furthermore the qualities of this Brahman. So the nearest example scriptures give to describe Brahman is Akasha or space. Space does not have form or color, so you can't see it. Space does not have smell or taste, so you can't smell or taste it. So your sense organs cannot experience space. Yet space exists and everything is supported by space. Krishna in this verse uses the example of space to describe the nature of Brahman. So Vedantic student is taught to understand the unknown from the known. The unknown is the attributeless Brahman. The known is space. So we can understand qualities of space, we can understand qualities of Brahman. So the Lord says here in verse number 15, Bhutanam of the creatures, Antaha, inside, this Brahman exists. So this Brahman is there inside everything in creation. At the same time, it also is Bahir. It exists outside of all the creatures. So within this body is Brahman, outside this body is Brahman also. Now we can take the example of space and a pot. So the space exists inside the pot, the very same space exists outside the pot. And even when the pot is broken, the very same space which was within the pot continues to exist. So there's a very famous prayer from the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad, and I'm sure many of you have heard this, Purnam Ada, that outside the body, the all-pervading supreme consciousness is Purnam, it is whole, it is complete. Purnam Idam, this, the supreme consciousness which is within the body, is also Purnam. So that which is outside the body is Purnam, that which is inside the body is also one and the same, it is Purnam. So only thing is we give different names. Space outside and space inside is one and the same, but from standpoint of location, we call one as inside pot space, the other as outside pot space. In the same way, the consciousness within the body All pervading consciousness outside is one and the same. But we call the consciousness in the body as Atman, and that same consciousness which exists outside the body as Brahman. Another nature of Brahman is that it is charam, it is moving, and acharam, non-moving. But really speaking, how can Brahman, which is everywhere, how can it move from one place to another? So this is an allegorical meaning. It means that Brahman exists in anything that is moving, that is in action, that is vibrant. At the same time, Brahman also exists in insentient things. So meaning Brahman is in humans, in animals, in insects. They are in motion all the time. At the same time, Brahman also exists in rocks, trees, metal that are non-moving. So Brahman is in everything. There is where it is moving or non-moving, Brahman is there. Sukshmatvat, due to its subtleness, it's very subtle. Tat, this Brahman is avikneyam, it is incomprehensible. Brahman can never be experienced by the senses. Why? As it does not have any attributes of sound, taste, touch, smell, form. The senses can only experience that which is gross. So among the 5 elements, the most gross is earth and the most subtle is space. But Brahman is even more subtler than space. So it is incomprehensible. Now, if it is incomprehensible, how can we say it exists? There are many things which our senses cannot experience, but they exist, like atoms, germs, bacteria, etc. So, where is this Brahman? Now, people have this misconception that after death, we need to travel and reach Paramatma or Brahman. So, in the movies, they show also this Atma leaving the body, traveling a long distance and reaching some place far away, where in heaven, where somewhere Brahman sits. But Krishna says, Tat, this Brahman is Durashtam, it is far away. At the same time, it is Antike, it is near. Thus, far and near, what does it mean? It means that Brahman is all pervading, it is everywhere. It is, Shankara adds an explanation to this. He says, Brahman is far away for the ignorant people who perceive that God is some supreme being sitting in heaven. However, for the wise people, they have come to understand that Brahman is within you and we need not travel to be with Brahman. So being one with Brahman means dropping your own ignorance that Brahman is different than you. Thus, the great declaration of the Upanishads is for the seeker to realize this highest truth and claim, Aham Brahma Asmi. I, the Atma, am the same as Brahman. Once this realization dawns on the seeker, they become one with Brahman. In Valmiki Ramayana, there is a very interesting dialogue between Lord Rama and Hanuman. One day, Hanuman asked Lord Rama asked Hanuman, Hanuman, how do you see me? And Hanuman answers, Deha Buddhaya Dasoham. He says, O Lord, when I think of myself as a Deha, as this mortal, perishable body, then I see you as the master and I am your dasa, I am your servant. Jiva Buddhaya Tvam Damshakam. When I see myself as the Jiva, which is limited in this body, then I see you as Paramatma, the unlimited whole, and I consider myself as an amsa, as a fraction or part of the totality. Finally, he says, Atma Buddhaya Tvam Eva Aham. But when I see myself as Atma, the all-pervading consciousness, then I see that Tvam Eva Aham, you and I are one. So, different people at a different level of spirituality view their relationship with God in different ways. So that brings us now to verse number 16. So Krishna gives here another quality of Brahman, again using example of space. That Brahman, pure existent consciousness like space, is also not subject to division. Everything else in creation we can partition, we can divide it, land, water, etc. but space can never be divided, and Brahman is also like space and can never be divided. So vibhaktam means divided, okay, which can be divided into various portions. However, the Lord says Brahman is avibhaktam, undivided. But even though it is undivided, is invisible, it appears as though divided. How? Bhuteshu, in all the beings. The Atman or Brahman seems to be divided, as though in my body there's one Atma, in your body there's another Atma, and so forth. So how many Atmas appear to be there? Millions and millions. But in reality there's only one Atma in the whole creation. Now, when we build a house, we divide the space into rooms, but it is our ignorance that we think that we have divided space by putting up the walls. But space in every room is one and the same. It is only us, we give different names to that space. Dining room space, kitchen space, bedroom space, and etc. But space is only one. So in reality, even though Brahman is avibhaktam, undivided, it stitam appears or exists even as though vibhaktam, as though divided. To ignorant people, they think they are different atmas in different bodies, which is not the truth. Next quality is Brahman is bhuta bhatir, the sustainer of all the creation. How to understand this? Take the example of gold again. Without gold, ornaments will not exist. Without Brahman, this creation will not exist, because Brahman is known as the cause and the sustenance of this whole creation. So that here he also explains in verse number 16, he says, that Brahman, Neyam, to be known as Grashishnu. The word Grashishnu means the cause of all the dissolution. Similarly, when all ornaments are melted, they merge back into gold. So when the whole creation is dissolved, it merges back into God. And the Lord says Brahman is also Prabha Vishnu. He is the cause of all creation. Just like gold is the cause of all ornaments. So therefore, this Brahman is Bhuta Bhatir. It sustains the creation. It is Grashishnu. It is the cause of dissolution. It is Prabha Vishnu, which is the cause of all creation. So these three, Brahman is one, but he has three powers. He has the powers of creation, perseverance, and dissolution. These are the three powers of that one Brahman. That brings us to verse number 17. So in verse number 17, apart from example of space to explain the nature of Brahman, Krishna uses another allegory, Jyoti or light or effulgence, to explain about Brahman. He says here in verse number 17, Api Jyotisam, even of the lights, Tat, meaning that Brahman is Jyoti, the light. So Brahman is the source or the illumination of everything. Whatever that shines in this creation, the very source is Brahman. The Devas are known as the shining ones because they illumine every part of our body. In fact, all the senses that experience the world are enlivened by the presiding Devas of that organ. Each organ has got a presiding Deva. So although the Devas are the source of illumination for our body, enabling us to experience the world, however, the source of the effulgence of all Devas is Brahman alone. In chapter 15, you can refer to verses 12, 13 and 14, where the Lord says, I, Brahman, am the source of illumination for the sun, the moon, and the fire that is in all beings. In Kathopanishad also, it is mentioned through Brahman's luster, all these, the creations, are variously illumined. So this Brahman is Jyotisam Jyoti. It is a light of all lights. So Sat and Chit nature of Brahman has been explained. Brahman Uchate, the Lord goes on to say, is said to be Param, beyond Tamasa, darkness. There are many places where there exists darkness. However, darkness can never envelop light. Darkness can never exist where there is effulgence. So that means Brahman cannot be overshadowed or enveloped by any darkness. No darkness can taint, hide, or take away the brilliance of Brahman. Sri Krishna now concludes the description of Brahman by saying, Brahman is jnanam, it is pure knowledge. It is of the nature of pure knowledge, pure consciousness. Therefore, Brahman can only be revealed through the path of knowledge, Atmagyan. Brahman is therefore neyam, the knowable. It is worthy of being known. Why? By knowing, realizing this supreme state, there remains nothing else to be known. So by having knowledge of gold, example, by having knowledge of gold, one understands the essence of ornaments. By knowing clay, one understands the nature of all pots. Brahman being the substratum of this whole creation, by knowing the nature of Brahman, one will understand the nature of the whole creation. Brahman is the ultimate truth to be known by all, the only thing worthy to be known by all. So Brahman is Jnanagamyam. Another description here is Jnanagamyam, which means Brahman is the goal of knowledge. Since Brahman is knowledge and the only thing worthy to be known, which merges a spiritual seeker with the highest bliss, therefore Brahman is the goal. Knowing Brahman is the culmination of this knowledge. Self-knowledge is to be studied with no other goal in mind but to attain Brahman. Sri Krishna, having glorified the path of knowledge and knowing Brahman as the goal, the next question will arise, where is this Brahman which is my goal? Krishna says in this verse 17, Sarvasya, Brahman is in everyone's hridi, hearts, Vishishtitam. Vishishtitam means it exists in everybody's hearts. So the word hridi or heart here is not the gross organ which is in our chest known as the heart, but it is a philosophical language. It means the mind. As we feel emotions in our minds, even the feelings of devotion arises in our mind. In the Upanishads, it is said that consciousness resides in the cave of our intellect. It is so subtle, and being nearest to the intellect, it can only be perceived through the path of knowledge. And you can refer to chapter 6 verse 21 as a connection to this verse. So we have come to the end of a session, and when we resume in the next recording, we will carry on with chapter 13 verse number 18. Hari Om Tat Sat.